You want to know how you become the most successful president of Real Madrid ever? Perhaps the most successful club president that has ever existed for any football club. Well, it starts with being able to manipulate players to be able to accomplish what you're trying to do. I have on the record is saying Florentino Perez, in my opinion, is incredibly annoying. I hate a lot of the different things that he does. I find him braggadocious. I find him perhaps overconfident. Maybe that's just my own aversion to people that kind of put themselves out there in that way and seem to be owed things. But I also have to acknowledge, and I feel it is important to acknowledge the fact that he is all of the things that I just mentioned right at the beginning of this. He is arguably the greatest president of any football club ever. And just the latest example of exactly why he has why he is so great has come to light. Why he is this godfather-like figure, somehow perpetually having daughters' weddings in which he can be asked questions and then owe somebody something and then have somebody owe them something in return. Right? Florentino Perez has his tentacles in every single part of the world's game. It's unbelievable the extent to which he goes to be able to manipulate markets to get the players that he wants. I mean, Mbappe has felt like a lifelong project, right? The idea that get Kylian Mbappe for free is stupid. Then he has eventually played PSG like a fiddle. And you couldn't tell me for a second, right, that Florentino Perez didn't always assume Kylian Mbappe was going to play for Real Madrid. And just look at the way that he has transformed the team from those Galacticos that he initially built, right, that won a bunch of trophies, to the Cristiano Ronaldo show with the brilliant midfield and the resounding amount of talent, back to front, that was able to win 3 straight Champions Leagues. And now he's retooled the team into a young winning machine while still hanging on to Kroos, hanging on to Modric, so that he can keep some of that winning experience around. Nacho still being there, right? Those types of guys that are able to pass down all that they've learned to this new generation of players that are still just somehow carrying on the mystique. And the way that Florentino Perez is able to construct these teams is he has a galvanizing effect on players. And this latest example of it is again beyond impressive for me, because it demonstrates how he gets those tentacles into players' brains and plants the seed of them playing for Real Madrid. In this story, it revolves around Antonio Rudiger, right? The German international center back who ended up at Real Madrid in 2022 and has been a staple, somebody that has been capable of shutting down Erling Haaland, which seemingly no other human being on the planet is capable of for long periods of time. While Erling Haaland going up against Antonio Rudiger, you finally figure out why the Vikings are defeated. Like, what, you can finally see the vision for the first time. You're like, I get it now. Antonio Rudiger is the modern Alfred the Great, right? He's showing up, he's building boroughs, and he is defeating the Viking way, one clean sheet, one shutdown of Erling Haaland at a time. But Antonio Rudiger was being manipulated. I mean, manipulated is a strong word here, but Antonio Rudiger was being put on notice by Florentino Perez 6 years before he signed for Real Madrid. If you think the Kylian Mbappe saga has been long, the Antonio Rudiger saga was even longer than that, right? Because such an important part of player recruitment in the modern age is having players that actually want to play for you. This is the big issue that a ton of clubs run into. Borussia Dortmund's a club that comes to mind where players get to a certain point and they feel like they have to leave Borussia Dortmund. Now, Real Madrid makes itself out to be, and Florentino Perez is a massive part of that, the end of the roadmap. Like, if you accomplish everything you want to accomplish, you end up playing for Real Madrid. There is no club to go to past that unless you are not playing there, right? Like, they are the highest attainment, and he is able to he's able to continue that. He's able to he makes it persist in everybody's mind, whether you're talking to a Kylian Mbappe and he just leans into like, oh, you always wanted to play for me as a kid, or whether you're Antonio Rudiger and you are about to be selected for the 2016 Euros, right? The 2016 Euros is going to be the first major tournament that Antonio Rudiger's playing with Germany for. Rudiger at the time is playing for Roma. He's on loan from Stuttgart, where he came up in his career, right? He would eventually sign for Roma and play for one season. But in the preparation for the Euros, Antonio Rudiger tears his knee. He tears his ACL, a pretty catastrophic injury. We're talking about somebody that has less than 100 total senior first team appearances, right, at club level, right? Somebody that is just getting into the international picture with Germany. right? Somebody that just now has 68 caps, right? Going into the 2016 Euros, Antonio Rudiger was a guy that was being felt out in the German national team. This is not somebody that at this time would have been on Real Madrid's radar at all. But recently, in a story by Marca, Antonio Rudiger says that after he injured his knee, he got a letter from Florentino Perez wishing him a speedy recovery. Do you know how insane that is? Florentino Perez, the president of Real Madrid, is sending a letter wishing a speedy recovery to an upstart German center back who's just kind of getting into the national team and cutting his teeth in the national team after he tore his ACL. This guy is not a transfer target of Real Madrid. He's not somebody that you could see being on Real Madrid in the near future. And he's also somebody whose development was just absolutely decapitated by a torn ACL. And Florentino Perez sent him a letter wishing him a speedy recovery. Now, Florentino Perez is brilliant because the effect that this had was predictable, but Rudiger lays it out. He says, I received a letter from Perez. I had the letter every day in front of me, and I asked myself, a man like me? Like, this was shocking to Rudiger because even though he was cracking the German national team, he had clearly never thought of himself as the caliber to play for Real Madrid, right? That is a sort of progression. It's like a sort of progression you need to make in your own mind. Right, that step forward, I'm going to be a Real Madrid player one day. And he's over here like Florentino Perez knows who I am. Like Florentino Perez knows who I am and thinks of me enough to send me a letter to wish me a speedy recovery. I mean, he says that. Before that letter, Real Madrid seemed far away to me. With the letter, I thought, one day I will get there. He wished me a speedy recovery. I couldn't believe it. My mother has it kept. His mom still has the letter that Florentino Perez sent him 8 years ago. Florentino Perez planted the seed for a transfer he ended up making 6 years later with just one letter to give Antonio Rudiger the belief and perhaps even the goal to reach that sort of precipice that he needed to reach in order to get on to Real Madrid. This is a level of 4D chess that I could have never even conceptualized. It's so simple. It's so intelligent. It's the type of thing you would expect the best club president in the world to do, right? And a guy that's remaking his team in this new vision, but his ability to keep these guys in line and wanting to play for Real Madrid and let him know he's thinking about them and kind of galvanize all of these players to want to play for Real Madrid. And when you can do that, then you're going to get a cheaper deal as well, whether it's Kylian Mbappe being able to manipulate PSG so he's able to leave for free, or Antonio Rudiger saying he wants to leave so you get a pretty bang-on average deal, right? Like even the Jude Bellingham deal. If any team in the Premier League was coming for Jude Bellingham, you got a feeling it would have been even more money, right? The 100 million still somehow just feels like a massive bargain. Like everything that they're doing at Real Madrid feels like a massive bargain. And it's because everybody they're signing desperately wants to go to Real Madrid. And a big reason for that are the different buttons that Florentino Perez is able to push with just little letters like this. I mean, how many of these stories do you think are out there that we don't even know about? Rudiger continues, by the way. He says, when I realized I could go to Real Madrid, when I won the Champions League with Chelsea, then I knew I could go. At that moment, I understood that I was ready to sign for Real Madrid. You want to be on a winning side and you have to go to Real Madrid. Of course, PSG was also interested in him, but according to Rudiger, they never really had a chance, which of course drives down the price for Real Madrid. He said, you were sending me a lot of messages about PSG, but I thought it's not what I'm looking for. I don't really have anything against PSG. They are a great club, a nice club, doing everything good. But next to it, there is Real Madrid. Real Madrid. With all due respect to the other clubs, but here you see the difference. Florentino Perez sent a letter to a young player who had just gotten a catastrophic injury and was just breaking into the German national team and just becoming a regular at Roma. And in that letter, planted the seed of a transfer he pulled off 6 years later. Look, if I was able to conceptualize that, maybe I'd be in charge of a football club instead of making videos like this. But I am blown away. I mean, sometimes you are witnessing true simplistic genius and look, he's not the only person that's ever sent a letter, right? But there is so much to the transfer market these days that goes beyond numbers and figures, right? In every single corner, in every single small space of the transfer market, every nook and cranny, Florentino Perez is finding a way to gain an advantage. And while this sort of thing might not work on everybody, right? There might be a lot of other promises that you have to make to X or Y or about playing time or whose mom's house you need to buy or whatever, right? With Antonio Rudiger, this worked. He planted the seed of a transfer. He sowed the Rudiger transfer 6 years before he did it. Long before he knew that Rudiger was going to be a player that was going to be capable of playing for Real Madrid, but he saw that he had a chance, and he wanted to make sure that he let him know that he saw that he had a chance, to give him the idea that he was thinking about him, just with a little get well letter. Absolutely flabbergasted at how well it worked, how impressive it is, and how right the scouting was, too. But there is, of course, the alternative, which is that a lot of these letters get sent out. Right, and very few of them end up actually producing a transfer that makes Real Madrid and Florentino Perez look like a genius, right? But I love the idea that there's like 200 of these letters that get sent out to people who end up completely flopping, and it just never comes out because why would it? You know, it's just a one-off letter. But this one worked. And look, even if that is the way it is, even if Florentino Perez is basically Hallmark and he's just shipping out letters 20 a day, right, to anybody that gets hurt or anybody that gets a promotion or wins an award, like, hey, congrats, really love the way you're playing or whatever. It still works. You know, the concept still works. It's like if Florentino Perez is just here rubber stamping these letters, but it's still having the desired effect on players, motivating them to maybe one day be eligible for the privilege to play for Real Madrid. And think about what he said. He reached the pinnacle of the sport with Chelsea. He won the Champions League, and only reaching the pinnacle of the sport made him feel like he was worthy. I mean, Real Madrid's sitting on the top of the pop. I know there's multiple clubs out there that call themselves the biggest club in the world, right? Whether it be Bayern Munich or, Manchester United. I remember Romelu talking about that sort of stuff. Or Man City is starting to try and get itself up there, right? Liverpool there for a little while. Right, PSG trying to climb up that, but they need a Champions League to be able to call. I mean, think about that. Rudiger won a Champions League, something PSG's never done, ever, right? And still, that was just his stepping stone to go to Real Madrid. But Real Madrid's the biggest club in the world, right? They got the most Champions Leagues, right? They've got this magnetism that no other club on the planet, it seems, is able to match. All roads lead to Real Madrid, and a lot of that is because of Florentino Perez, and a lot of that is because he finds every small advantage he can find, even if it's just a letter to a young German center back who tore his ACL. How freaking nuts is that? And it worked. Oh, it's like not even a fair fight.